She was the kind of person people barely noticed. Not because she was invisible, but because she never tried to force attention. She moved through her days quietly, doing what needed to be done, speaking only when required. In crowded places, she stood slightly to the side. In conversations, she listened more than she talked. Many took this as weakness. Some thought she had nothing important to say. Others assumed she lacked confidence or ability. None of them truly knew her. Every morning she awoke before the city fully came alive. The small room she lived in was simple, almost bare, but clean and calm. Sunlight slipped through thin curtains and rested on the floor. She would sit on the edge of her bed for a moment, gathering herself, reminding her heart to stay steady for another long day. There was no audience here, no judgment, just quiet breathing and familiar walls. Her daily routine never changed much. She worked long hours in a place where effort was expected, but appreciation was rare. People spoke to her quickly, often without looking at her face. Instructions were given, tasks assigned, and then forgotten. If she did something right, no one noticed. If she made a small mistake, it stood out sharply. She accepted this without complaint, though it weighed on her more than she let show. There were moments when laughter followed her steps. Not loud enough to cause a scene, but just enough to sting. A comment about how she dressed. A joke about how quiet she was. A careless remark about how someone like her could never stand out. These words were not shouted, but they stayed with her long after the sound faded. She carried them silently, stacking them deep inside. Despite everything, she never allowed bitterness to take root. Instead, she turned inward. When her day ended and she returned home, she finally allowed herself to breathe freely. That was when her real world began. In the stillness of the evening, she focused on the one thing that gave her peace. The thing no one else knew she was preparing for. She practiced every night. Sometimes her body was tired, her hands sore, her mind heavy from the day's small hurts. Still, she showed up for herself. She repeated the same movements again and again, correcting small errors, pushing herself to improve. There was no applause, no praise, no one watching. Only determination and quiet hope. She remembered the first time she realized she had something special. It happened years ago, during a moment that felt ordinary to everyone else. While others were busy talking and laughing, she was focused on what she loved. A small group noticed for a second, then moved on. No encouragement followed. No one said she should keep going. That silence almost convinced her to stop. Almost her family meant well, but they did not understand her dream. They encouraged safety, stability, and realistic goals. They reminded her of responsibilities and limitations. They never said she couldn't do it, but they never said she could either. Their doubt was gentle, wrapped in concern. But it still left a mark. There were nights when she sat alone, wondering if everyone else was right. Maybe she was just imagining her potential. Maybe her effort was wasted on something that would never matter. On those nights, tears came quietly, without drama. She wiped them away and continued. Not because she was fearless, but because stopping felt worse than failing. Outside her small world, life moved quickly. People chased recognition, praise, and instant success. She watched from a distance, feeling out of place. She didn't know how to be loud or bold. She didn't know how to sell herself. What she knew was patience. What she knew was discipline. What she knew was how to keep going when no one was cheering. At work, a notice was posted one afternoon. It announced an upcoming event that would involve many people from different places. Participation was optional but visible. The kind of opportunity that attracted confident voices and strong personalities. As others gathered around the notice, excitement filled the air. Names were suggested, opinions shared. No one mentioned her. She stood at the back, reading the words again and again. Her heart beat faster with every line. This was the kind of moment she had quietly prepared for. The kind of stage she dreamed about late at night. But fear crept in quickly. She imagined the looks, the whispers, the laughter. She imagined failing in front of everyone. For days, she said nothing. She went through her routine, pretending the notice didn't exist. But her mind kept returning to it. Each night, her practice grew more intense. Each movement held more meaning. It was as if her body knew something her mind was afraid to accept. Around her, people continued to underestimate her. Someone joked about how only the best should even try. Another said it would be embarrassing to fail publicly. Their words were careless, but sharp. She absorbed them quietly, as she always did. What they didn't see was the fire slowly forming beneath her calm surface. One evening, after a particularly hard day, she sat alone longer than usual. The room felt heavier, the silence louder. She thought about the years she had spent hiding her ability, waiting for permission she might never receive. She realized something then. No one was going to invite her forward. No one was going to believe in her before she believed in herself. Her decision didn't come with dramatic music or bold gestures. It came quietly, like everything else in her life. She stood up, steadied her breath, and returned to her practice with renewed focus. This time, she wasn't just preparing for herself. She was preparing for the moment she would finally be seen. She knew the road ahead would not be kind. She expected doubt, resistance, and judgment. But she also knew what she carried inside her was real. It had grown stronger with every overlooked moment, every silent tear. Every night spent improving while the world slept. As the event drew closer, tension filled her days. She remained calm on the outside, but inside, her thoughts raced. She imagined stepping forward, imagined the silence before the first move. The first sound, the first chance to prove them wrong. Fear walked beside her, but it no longer led the way. This was only the beginning, the part no one would remember once the story was told. But without these quiet days, the struggle, the doubt, and the unseen effort, nothing else would matter. She was still underestimated, still overlooked, still standing in the shadows, but not for long. The day of the event arrived, and with it a mix of nerves and anticipation that made her chest tighten. The city seemed louder than usual, every sound sharper, every step echoing more deeply. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were simple but neat, wanting to feel comfortable, not flashy. It was not about showing off. It was about showing her truth. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of thoughts inside her mind. As she arrived at the venue, she saw the crowd gathered. Their faces a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and judgment. Some spoke in small groups, whispering and laughing quietly, glancing at her occasionally. She noticed the way they sized her up, expecting her to falter, expecting her to fail. Their doubt was almost tangible, pressing down on her as if to test her resolve. She kept her gaze forward, avoiding unnecessary eye contact. Every step she took felt heavier, not because of fear, but because of the weight of all the times she had been underestimated. Every comment, every joke, every sideways glance came rushing back. But she also carried her years of preparation. She carried every silent practice, every night spent perfecting herself when no one was watching. Around her, the participants were confident, some even arrogant. They moved with ease, their smiles bright, their conversations loud. Some greeted her politely, some ignored her completely. None of them seemed to know the depth of what she was about to offer. They were all playing a game she had been preparing for, but their preparation was different. They had confidence, yes, but not the kind that comes from quiet persistence and unshakable determination. The organizers called everyone to gather for instructions. She joined the line silently, standing near the back as usual. The room buzzed with energy, but she felt calm in her own way. She listened carefully to the instructions, noting every detail, imagining how she would move, how she would respond, how she would show them all who she truly was. Every word the organizer spoke was filed away in her mind, stored for the moment when she would finally step forward, as people started talking among themselves. Some glanced at her and whispered, "Do you think she can do it?" One asked. "I've never seen her try before," another replied. She heard the doubt in their voices, the judgment that had followed her all her life. For a moment, a familiar pang of fear returned. But then she remembered her nights of practice, the sweat, the tears, and the hours spent perfecting every detail. She straightened her shoulders and let the fear pass through her like water. not letting it sink in. Soon, it was time for everyone to take their positions. The stage was simple but demanding, and the space was unfamiliar. She took her place quietly, noticing the others adjusting themselves. Testing the environment, showing off small displays of confidence. She didn't need to do that. She only needed to trust herself and her preparation. She closed her eyes for a second, feeling the energy of the room, letting it pass over her without distraction. Then, she heard a small murmur from the crowd, followed by laughter from someone at the edge of the room. They didn't know her, but they had already made their judgments. They thought they understood her story from a few glances, from the way she had moved through life quietly. They thought they had predicted the outcome. They were wrong. She opened her eyes and focused on the task ahead. Every movement, every action had been practiced countless times. Her mind worked like a machine, precise and controlled, yet filled with emotion. She had learned that control did not mean suppression. It meant guiding her talent with clarity and purpose. The room seemed to fade around her, the murmurs and whispers becoming distant, almost irrelevant. This was her moment, and she was ready. The first steps were the hardest. Each step toward the center of the stage felt heavy with expectation. She imagined all the people who had doubted her over the years, the silent faces in her life that never gave her encouragement. She imagined every small setback, every overlooked effort, and she turned all of it into determination. With every step, she felt lighter, stronger, more certain. Then it began. Her performance started quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. The audience noticed something was different. Their whispers ceased, their laughter faded. There was a pause, a subtle shift in the energy of the room. The thing they had underestimated was starting to reveal itself. The quiet power she had cultivated over years was unfolding before them, catching them off guard. At first, a few people looked skeptical. They had seen many attempt to stand out, and many had failed. But this was not a show of force, nor a display of arrogance. It was a natural, flowing demonstration of skill and passion. Each movement she made, each note she played, each word she spoke carried authenticity. It demanded attention, but it did not beg for it. Gradually, the audience leaned in. Eyes widened, mouths closed, conversations stopped. The very people who had laughed moments ago were now focused entirely on her. Their skepticism was being replaced by astonishment. They had expected failure, but they were seeing excellence instead. And it was real, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. She felt the shift, but she did not let it distract her. Her mind was focused entirely on the present moment, on each detail, each step, each movement. There was no room for ego or pride. There was only execution, only honesty, only the truth of her effort. Every second of practice, every quiet night alone had prepared her for this. Every underestimate she had endured had been a hidden strength she could now use. The energy in the room grew intense. The audience was silent, not out of fear, but because they were captivated. Some held their breath, unsure of what would come next. Others leaned forward, wanting to take in every detail. The room that had been filled with doubt and judgment was now a space of awe. They were no longer laughing, no longer whispering. They were watching, truly watching, for the first time. Her own nerves had not disappeared, but they were different now. They were no longer fear. They were the pulse of focus, the rhythm of concentration, the excitement of showing something real. She felt alive, every sense heightened. The years of preparation, the long hours, the moments of self-doubt of it had led to this. And she was ready to give everything she had. She noticed a few people exchanging glances, the ones who had doubted her the most. Their expressions shifted from amusement to shock. Some looked embarrassed, realizing how quickly they had misjudged her. Others simply stared, captivated by what they had thought impossible. She did not need to look at them. She only needed to continue to remain true to herself. To let her performance speak louder than any words could. Time seemed to stretch and compress at once. Every movement she made, every note, every step, was magnified by the intensity of the moment. She could feel the audience's attention, their astonishment, their respect growing in real time. And yet, she remained calm. The calmness was not absence of emotion, but mastery of it. She had learned to harness everything she felt and channel it into her actions. As her performance continued, the initial skepticism of the crowd completely vanished. The energy shifted again, this time into admiration. People who had underestimated her began to understand the depth of her talent. They began to see what years of silent dedication, hard work, and perseverance could achieve. And it was undeniable. They had thought they knew her. They had been wrong. By the end of the session, the audience was fully captivated. A heavy silence filled the room, the kind of silence that follows a moment too powerful to immediately process. No one moved, no one spoke. They were absorbing what they had just witnessed, unable to find words to describe it. For once, she was the center of attention, but it did not feel strange. It felt like justice, like recognition she had earned quietly but thoroughly. She stepped back, her breathing steady but deep, her heart still racing. She had done it. She had faced the doubt, the judgment, and the fear. She had shown them all who she really was. And now, for the first time, she could feel the power of being truly seen. She had taken the stage not as someone trying to prove herself, but as someone finally ready to reveal the truth of her talent. The murmurs began slowly, then grew. Some clapped quietly at first, unsure how to react. Then the applause increased, louder and louder, until the room was filled with it. She did not move immediately, letting them continue, letting the sound wash over her. Every clap was a recognition, a piece of validation she had longed for, yet never sought from others. She had found it herself. In that moment, she realized that being underestimated had never been a curse. It had been preparation, a way for her to grow stronger without distraction. The doubts of others had sharpened her focus, forced her to push beyond what seemed possible, and cultivate resilience that now shone for everyone to see. She had turned every expectation against her into fuel for success. By the time she left the stage, she was no longer the quiet, overlooked person who had entered the room hours ago. She had transformed, not only in the eyes of others, but in her own heart. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, born from experience and accomplishment. The path ahead was still unknown, but she had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that she could rise above doubt, judgment, and fear. She had faced them all and emerged victorious, her performance leaving everyone speechless, even after her performance had captured the attention of everyone in the room. She felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The first part had gone well, but she knew the most important moments were still ahead. There was no guarantee the rest of her presentation would continue to impress, and the thought of faltering made her stomach tighten. She had prepared for every detail, yet the unpredictability of real life always remained a challenge. After a short break, she returned to her position. Her hands were steady now, but her mind remained sharp, replaying every step she had taken before. The quiet confidence she had cultivated over years of practice guided her movements. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had already proven something valuable, that her talent could not be ignored around her. The other participants carried themselves with visible confidence. Some laughed and chatted easily, trying to maintain composure. She noticed the way they watched her from the corner of their eyes, as though trying to predict her next move. There was a mixture of admiration and disbelief in their expressions. Some were still skeptical, but the majority now seemed unsure of what to expect. They had anticipated simplicity. What they had witnessed was anything but simple. As she prepared to continue, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Years of overlooked effort, quiet practice, and moments of self-doubt had all combined to form the person standing here today. She had learned to use doubt as fuel, to turn silence into focus, and to let every misjudgment strengthen her determination. This reflection gave her energy, subtle fire that warmed her from the inside out. The next part of her performance demanded precision and emotional depth. Each movement required attention to detail and timing, and each step held meaning beyond the surface. She remembered the countless nights alone, correcting mistakes that no one would ever see. Every repetition had built muscle memory, every struggle had strengthened resolve, and every tear had sharpened awareness. Now, All that preparation came together in perfect harmony. The room held its breath. Even those who had doubted her initially were now fully attentive. They could sense something special unfolding, though they could not yet articulate it. Every small motion, every carefully considered gesture, added to the growing sense of awe in the space. She had learned that power often came in subtlety, and now she wielded it effortlessly. As the minutes passed, she felt a rhythm emerging. Her movements flowed seamlessly, each action leading naturally into the next. She was no longer conscious of her nervousness or the judgment of others. The preparation and effort of years had become instinctive. She trusted herself completely, and that trust transformed into a quiet authority that filled the room. From the audience, she sensed changing reactions. Some faces that had once carried skepticism now showed respect, some even admiration. Whispers had stopped entirely, replaced by quiet, concentrated observation. The atmosphere was electric, yet restrained. It was a tension born not of fear, but of recognition. The room had shifted from doubt to anticipation, and she held their attention completely. She knew the performance was more than a display of skill. It was a demonstration of resilience. Each step symbolized her ability to rise above neglect and mockery. Each note carried the weight of the years she had spent honing her craft in solitude. Each gesture revealed the depth of her determination. She realized that she was not performing for anyone else. She was performing to affirm the truth she had always known about herself, that she had the ability, the talent and the strength to stand tall despite being underestimated. The pressure remained, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it became a companion, guiding her to stay fully present and engaged. She had learned to embrace pressure as a signal that she was in the right space, doing the right thing. It reminded her that meaningful moments often involved risk and courage. The harder the challenge, the more meaningful the triumph would be, as she continued. Small details in the audience began to shift subtly. People who had been rigid in posture now leaned forward, drawn in. Eyes that had been wandering now followed every action intently. A quiet murmur of admiration began to ripple through the crowd, almost unnoticed at first, then gradually louder. She did not seek validation, but the recognition that her effort was being understood brought a warmth that bolstered her further. She also noticed her own emotional response. There was a mixture of satisfaction, relief, and pride. Satisfaction at executing what she had practiced flawlessly. Relief that the uncertainty of the first moments had passed. And pride at the courage it had taken to face potential failure in front of others. Her journey had always been personal, and in that moment, she fully acknowledged her own growth and achievement. There was a brief pause as she adjusted her stance, preparing for the most challenging segment. This part required not only technical skill but emotional authenticity. It demanded that she convey depth and sincerity in a way that transcended mere performance. Years of quiet preparation allowed her to merge skill with feeling seamlessly. Every emotion she had stored from past struggles, every frustration and disappointment, now served as fuel for expression. As she moved through this segment, she felt completely immersed. She was not conscious of anyone watching. Instead, she was focused on the flow of her own actions. It was a state she had longed to reach for years, a balance between discipline and freedom. The years of silent effort had culminated in this moment of total presence and authenticity. The audience, sensing the depth of her focus and skill, responded instinctively. Faces softened, eyes widened, and an almost tangible sense of awe filled the room. The very people who had expected her to falter were now captivated. They had underestimated her, assumed she would fail, and now they realized they had witnessed something rare and powerful. The realization settled over them quietly, like a slow dawn. Even amidst the growing admiration, she remained grounded. Her mind was fully engaged in each step, each movement, each sound. She had learned that the illusion of ease came from mastery, not luck. She relied on preparation, discipline, and presence to navigate every moment. Her previous doubts had taught her resilience, and resilience now gave her confidence without arrogance. Time seemed to stretch as she performed. Moments that might have seemed ordinary elsewhere felt monumental here. Every action carried significance, not only for the audience, but for herself. She was reclaiming her own narrative, taking control of how she would be seen and understood. Years of underestimation had brought her to this singular point. She embraced it fully. By the end of this segment, the audience was fully engaged. The shift in their perception was complete. They had entered the performance with assumptions and doubts, and they were leaving with recognition and admiration. She had managed not only to meet expectations, but to exceed them in ways no one had imagined. And in that achievement, she found a deep satisfaction that went beyond external validation. As she stepped back briefly to catch her breath, she realized something important. This was not the culmination of her journey. It was a crucial part of it. The event had tested her in ways she could not have predicted, and she had risen to the challenge. The performance had proven more than talent. It had demonstrated resilience, focus, and the power of quiet determination. She understood now that being underestimated had not hindered her. It had prepared her. She could feel the energy of the room still buzzing, but she was no longer nervous. She had embraced every challenge, every doubt, and every skeptical glance. What remained was the continuation of her journey, where she would need to carry this newfound recognition with humility and focus. She had proven something to herself and to the world. But she knew that each moment of acknowledgement came with a responsibility to continue growing and striving. The rest of the day would bring further moments, opportunities, and tests. She was ready to face them all, armed with the experience of what she had already achieved. The audience had been silenced and captivated. But the true measure of her strength lay in her ability to continue performing with the same authenticity, skill, and heart. And she knew she could do it. The performance had reached a turning point. She could feel it in the room, an almost tangible change in the energy that surrounded her. The initial skepticism, the quiet judgment, had faded, replaced by focused attention. Every person in the audience seemed to be holding their breath, drawn into the unfolding story of her skill and determination. They had underestimated her, and now the reality of her talent was impossible to ignore. She moved with deliberate care, each motion precise and intentional. It was not about speed or force, but about grace and authenticity. Years of quiet preparation had built a foundation so strong that even under intense scrutiny, her actions flowed naturally. She had learned to embrace pressure, to let it sharpen her focus rather than overwhelm her. Every step was guided by her inner rhythm, every note she played or action she took resonating with the effort and emotion she had invested over the years. From the audience, she sensed the shift. People who had whispered doubts were now leaning forward, their faces showing a mixture of awe and respect. The laughter that had accompanied her arrival had completely disappeared, replaced by silence that carried weight. Some faces were bright with admiration, others were thoughtful, as if trying to understand how someone so unassuming could carry such power. The room once filled with doubt now held an electric sense of possibility. All centered around her. Even as she performed, she remained acutely aware of her own emotions. There was pride, yes, but it was tempered by humility. Pride in what she had accomplished privately, in the hours of solitary effort, in the moments when no one else was watching. Humility in recognizing that this performance was not just for her, but for everyone who had judged, doubted, or underestimated her. She wanted them to see not just the skill, but the journey, the dedication, and the perseverance that made this moment possible. The performance demanded more than technical skill. It required emotional depth. She had to connect with something beyond herself, to convey honesty, vulnerability, and strength all at once. Each movement, each note, carried meaning, telling a story of struggle, persistence, and quiet triumph. She thought of the countless nights spent practicing alone, of the discouraging moments she had overcome, and of the determination that had never wavered. This was her chance to make all of it visible, to allow others to understand the depth of her journey. The audience could sense it. Even without words, they felt the weight of her preparation, the authenticity of her expression. They were witnessing more than a performance. They were witnessing the culmination of years of unseen effort, and that realization had a profound effect on them. The initial doubt, the judgmental stares, the whispers of disbelief, all were being replaced by a mixture of admiration, respect, and perhaps a little humility. She noticed subtle changes in their behavior. Some were leaning forward, fully engaged, their eyes following her every move. Others had stopped fidgeting, their attention fixed entirely on her. The shift was almost imperceptible at first, but gradually became undeniable. She was no longer simply performing. She was leading the audience through an experience, guiding them to understand what it meant to overcome doubt and expectation as the performance continued. She felt a profound sense of connection with the audience. They were no longer observers. They were participants in a shared moment of discovery. Each subtle gesture, each note, each step communicated a piece of her story. And as they absorbed it, she could see them responding in kind, recognizing not just her skill but her courage and resilience. The quiet strength that had defined her life was now visible to everyone around her. There were moments when her heart pounded, not from fear, but from exhilaration. The challenge of sustaining focus under scrutiny was intense, yet invigorating. She had learned to channel nervous energy into precision, to turn adrenaline into a tool rather than a hindrance. Years of discipline had prepared her for this, but the thrill of performing live in front of an audience remained unmatched. Every heartbeat, every breath was part of the rhythm that guided her actions. She also felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges she had faced, for the times she had been underestimated, for the moments of silence and solitude that had allowed her to grow. Those experiences had shaped her into the person she was now, capable of facing scrutiny with calm determination. The audience's attention, their astonishment, was a reflection of her journey, not just her talent. As she approached the climax of her performance, she pushed herself even further. Each movement became more precise, each note more expressive. She poured every ounce of focus and energy into the moment, knowing that this was the pinnacle, the point where everything she had worked for would be fully realized. The audience responded instinctively, drawn deeper into the unfolding display of skill and emotion. The room was filled with a sense of anticipation. Even those who had doubted her were now captivated, unable to look away. They had expected mediocrity or failure, and what they were witnessing defied every expectation. She had transformed their perception in real time, turning skepticism into admiration, doubt into respect. And through it all, she remained composed, grounded in her own truth. There were subtle signs of recognition throughout the audience. A nod here, a quiet gasp there, a brief look of astonishment in someone's eyes. Each reaction reinforced the reality of what she was achieving. She was not performing for validation, but the acknowledgement of her effort and skill added a layer of satisfaction and confidence. She knew that every underestimation she had faced had been a stepping stone, leading to this moment of undeniable presence as she brought the performance to its conclusion. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. Relief that she had maintained focus and composure, exhilaration at the impact she had made. The final moments were executed flawlessly, every gesture precise, every note resonant. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat, absorbing the full weight of what they had just witnessed. Then slowly, the room erupted into applause, a wave of recognition and admiration that filled the space. She stood quietly, letting the applause wash over her. It was not just the sound of hands clapping. It was the validation of years of effort, the recognition of resilience, and the acknowledgement of talent that had long been overlooked. She had proven something not only to the audience, but to herself, that perseverance, dedication, and quiet strength could overcome even the harshest judgment. As the clapping continued, she felt a shift within herself. Confidence replaced nervousness, satisfaction replaced doubt, and a quiet joy filled her. She had faced the challenge, met it head-on, and emerged victorious. And while the performance was over, the impact of it would linger both for her and for those who had underestimated her. They had witnessed something extraordinary, and she had reclaimed her story in the process. Even after leaving the stage, the energy lingered. People spoke in hushed tones, their faces reflecting the awe they had felt. Some approached her with sincere compliments, Others simply smiled, still absorbing the experience. She responded with quiet gratitude, acknowledging their words without needing excessive praise. She had already known her worth. This moment simply confirmed it in the eyes of others. That evening, as she reflected on the day, she realized the performance had been more than a display of skill. It had been a statement, a testament to perseverance, and a proof of self-belief. Every doubt she had faced, every underestimation, had led her to this moment. And in that realization, she found peace, strength, and an unwavering sense of purpose. The performance was not the end, it was a beginning. Step into a future where she would no longer be underestimated. The performance had ended. But the impact lingered in the room like a quiet echo. People moved slowly, still processing what they had seen. Some faces were filled with astonishment, others with admiration, and a few carried the faintest trace of regret for having doubted her. She stood silently, allowing the moment to fully unfold, understanding that recognition was not measured in applause alone, but in the shift of perception that had taken place. As the crowd began to disperse, a few individuals approached her, offering words of respect and congratulations. She listened, responding with calm gratitude. Each compliment was meaningful, yet it was not the validation she had sought for years. Her true satisfaction came from knowing that she had faced fear and doubt, confronted judgment, and remained steadfast in her purpose. She had proven, most importantly, to herself, that her strength and talent could not be underestimated. Walking out of the venue, the cool evening air brushed against her face, grounding her after the intensity of the performance. The streets were quieter now, but the city seemed different somehow. She noticed details she had overlooked before: the rhythm of footsteps, the soft hum of distant traffic, the warmth of streetlights reflecting off the pavement. The world, once indifferent, now felt more vivid, more alive. As though it had subtly shifted in recognition of her accomplishment, her mind replayed the events of the day. From the initial nervousness to the moments of clarity and flow on stage, she remembered the doubts she had carried, the fear of being judged, and the weight of being underestimated. Each of those moments now felt like steps that had led her to this point. She realized that adversity had been her greatest teacher, shaping resilience, focus, and the ability to transform pressure into strength at home. She took a moment to sit quietly, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The room was familiar, simple, and calming, a place where she could fully process the emotions of the day. She thought about the years of preparation, the countless hours spent alone, and the silent determination that had sustained her. It was in these quiet moments that she understood the full meaning of her accomplishment. It was not only the applause or recognition, it was the embodiment of perseverance and self-belief. Her thoughts turned to those who had underestimated her, who had doubted her abilities or dismissed her presence. She felt no anger, only understanding. They had not seen what she had built quietly over time, and their judgments were shaped by incomplete perspectives. Instead of resentment, she felt a quiet compassion, recognizing that everyone sees the world through their own lens. Her response had not been to argue or confront, but to act, to demonstrate her capability through action rather than words. The experience had also reshaped her understanding of herself. She had known her potential privately, but now she could see it reflected in the eyes of others. It was not about being superior or gaining praise. It was about acknowledging her journey, embracing her growth, and recognizing the power of dedication. She had learned that confidence was not born from recognition, but from the certainty of preparation and persistence. She began to consider what the future might hold. Opportunities that had seemed distant or unattainable now felt within reach. People who had once overlooked her were now open to seeing her differently. Yet she knew that true progress would come from continuing to work quietly and persistently, not relying solely on external validation. Each step forward required the same dedication, focus, self-belief that had brought her to this point in the days that followed. She noticed subtle changes in how she interacted with the world. Her posture was a little straighter, her steps a little surer. She spoke more confidently, though still with her natural humility. People responded differently to her presence, offering opportunities and listening more attentively. She did not seek these changes actively. They were the natural consequence of the shift in energy she carried, the reflection of her growing self-assurance. She also found joy in quiet reflection, recognizing the power of small, consistent efforts. She remembered moments that had once seemed insignificant, the extra hour of practice, the careful attention to detail, the perseverance through self-doubt. Each of these moments had built the foundation for her success. She realized that greatness is rarely sudden. It is the accumulation of countless small actions, performed consistently and with purpose. One evening, as she sat quietly, she thought about the people who might still underestimate her in the future. She smiled softly, understanding that their judgments would not define her. She had discovered a strength that could not be shaken by external opinions, confidence that was rooted in effort, experience, and authenticity. She knew that being underestimated would always be a possibility, but it no longer carried the power to limit her. The memory of the performance remained vivid. She could recall the faces of the audience, the silence that had followed, the shift from doubt to recognition. It was a reminder of what was possible when preparation meets opportunity, when courage is combined with skill, and when persistence triumphs over skepticism. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not because others finally saw her worth, but because she had never stopped believing in it herself. Her journey had also taught her patience. She understood now that growth does not happen overnight, and that true mastery requires time, effort, and endurance. The moments of waiting, the experiences of being overlooked, and the challenges of proving oneself were not obstacles, but essential components of development. She embraced the process, knowing that the journey itself was as valuable as the destination. As the days passed, she continued to refine her skills, not for recognition, but for the fulfillment and satisfaction they brought her. She sought to challenge herself further, to explore new dimensions of her abilities, and to continue growing in ways that were meaningful to her. She recognized that true success was measured not by external approval, but by personal growth, integrity, and the ability to face challenges with courage and determination. She also began to mentor others quietly, sharing her experiences and insights with those who were struggling or unsure of themselves. She encouraged perseverance, focus, and the importance of believing in one's potential. Her guidance was subtle, supportive, and practical, rooted in her own journey of overcoming doubt and underestimation. In doing so, she found additional fulfillment, knowing that her experiences could help others navigate their own paths. Over time, her life took on a new rhythm. The quiet persistence that had always defined her was now paired with the confidence of accomplishment. She approached challenges with a sense of readiness, knowing that effort and dedication would carry her forward. The fear of being underestimated no longer held sway. It had been replaced by the knowledge that she could rise to any occasion. In reflection, she understood that being underestimated had been a gift in disguise. It had forced her to develop patience, resilience, and self-reliance. It had taught her the value of quiet effort and the power of persistence. And most importantly, it had prepared her for moments when she would be called upon to demonstrate her true abilities in ways that could not be ignored. The experience left her with a deep sense of self-assurance. She had faced doubt, judgment, and the unknown, and emerged stronger and more capable than she had imagined. She knew that future challenges would arise, but she also knew that she possessed the strength, focus, and determination to meet them. The journey of being underestimated had not ended. It had simply transformed into a foundation for ongoing growth and achievement. She carried this understanding forward, embracing each day with quiet confidence and purpose. The story of being underestimated was no longer a limitation. It was a testament to her resilience, talent, and unyielding dedication. And in the knowledge that she had proven herself not only to others, but to herself, she felt a profound sense of freedom, empowerment, and readiness for whatever lay ahead.